For much of the 1960s, the creative identity of the Beatles seemed to revolve almost entirely around the legendary songwriting partnership of John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Their names dominated the writing credits, and their songs filled most of the band's albums. Meanwhile, the quieter presence of George Harrison often meant that his own compositions were limited to only one or two tracks per record. Yet behind the scenes, Harrison was steadily refining his craft. By the end of the decade, he had evolved into a songwriter of remarkable depth and subtlety, and one extraordinary song would finally prove that he deserved to stand alongside his bandmates as an equal creative force. That song was Something, Harrison's elegant masterpiece from Abbey Road. Even within an album packed with iconic moments, the track stood out immediately. Lennon himself reportedly called it the best track on the album, a remarkable compliment coming from one of the band's primary songwriters. Over time, Something would grow into one of the most admired love songs ever written in rock music. More importantly, it marked the moment when Harrison's songwriting brilliance could no longer be overlooked. George Harrison's defining breakthrough. The songwriting partnership of Lennon and McCartney remains one of the most prolific in popular music history. Roughly 180 songs in the Beatles' catalog carry their joint credit, a number that naturally overshadowed the contributions of their bandmates. But quantity never necessarily reflected quality, and by the late 1960s, Harrison had begun crafting songs that were every bit as sophisticated and emotionally resonant as those written by Lennon or McCartney. For years, Harrison had watched album track lists fill up before many of his songs had a chance to be included, yet he continued developing his writing style, blending melodic elegance with spiritual reflection. By 1969, that patience began to pay off. The origins of Something actually stretch back to the sessions for the Beatles' White Album in 1968. Harrison introduced the early version during those recordings, but after being rehearsed a handful of times, the song was set aside. It lingered unfinished for months before finally being revisited during the making of Abbey Road. When the band returned to it, the song revealed its true brilliance. With encouragement from Lennon and the band's producer George Martin, Something evolved into one of the album's emotional centerpieces. Its sweeping melody, understated arrangement, and heartfelt lyrics demonstrated a new level of songwriting maturity from Harrison. The song's impact became undeniable when it was later released as a double A-side single with Come Together. This release was historic. It marked the only time in the Beatles' career that a Harrison composition appeared as an A-side single. For an artist who had spent years fighting for space on Beatles albums, the moment symbolized a long overdue recognition. Even George Martin, who had guided the band since their earliest recordings, recognized how special the song was. Reflecting on Harrison's growth, Martin once noted that he first realized the guitarist's songwriting potential with Here Comes the Sun, but when Harrison presented Something, it was on an entirely different level. Its brilliance lay not in complexity, but in its simplicity, a pure and beautifully balanced expression of love. The deeper meaning behind Something. At first glance, Something appears to be a straightforward romantic love song. Because of this, many listeners assumed that Harrison wrote it for his wife at the time, Pattie Boyd. The theory seemed convincing. Boyd even appeared in the promotional film for the song, and she later wrote in her autobiography that Harrison casually told her the song had been written for her. But Harrison himself later offered a broader interpretation. During an interview with Rolling Stone, he explained that the song reflected a deeper philosophy about love, one heavily influenced by his interest in the Hare Krishna movement and Eastern spirituality. Harrison believed that romantic love was only one expression of something much larger. In his view, love itself was a universal force that connected people to something divine. As he once explained, when someone loves another person, what they are really seeing is the divine essence within them. That philosophy subtly appears in the song's lyrics. In the line, Harrison doesn't present love as a fixed certainty. Instead, he acknowledges its mystery and unpredictability. Feelings evolve, change, and sometimes fade, an idea deeply connected to the spiritual concept of impermanence that fascinated him during this period of his life. Even if Boyd initially inspired the song, Harrison's intention was never to confine its meaning to a single relationship. Rather, something reflects the idea that love itself, fluid, uncertain, and universal, is what truly matters. A prelude to Harrison's solo renaissance. Something was more than just a highlight of Abbey Road. In many ways, it hinted at the creative explosion that would follow shortly afterwards. When the Beatles finally dissolved, Harrison released his monumental solo album, All Things Must Pass, in 1970. That record revealed just how many powerful songs he had accumulated during his years in the band. It also expanded on the spiritual themes first glimpsed in Something, exploring ideas of impermanence, renewal, and spiritual awakening. Freed from the constraints of fitting his music into a band dynamic dominated by Lennon and McCartney, Harrison was finally able to fully embrace his artistic identity. Eastern musical influences, philosophical lyrics, and expansive arrangements all flourished in his solo work. Looking back, Something now feels like the turning point, the moment when George Harrison stepped out of the shadow of the Lennon and McCartney partnership and proved that he belonged beside them as one of the great songwriters of the era. More than half a century later, the song remains one of the most beloved compositions in the Beatles' catalog, and its legacy is clear. It wasn't just a beautiful love song, it was the moment George Harrison showed the world that he was every bit a creative equal of his legendary bandmates.